So we'll just take it from the top, my brother. And it's good to see you. And I didn't know you had only one eye. One-eyed Glimcher. Did they ever call you One-eyed Glimcher? Did you get up to Rhinebeck?
Yeah.
And you got some footage of those planes. Isn't that a place?
Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
World War I planes.
Yeah.
It's colorful.
They've got them up there at Rhinebeck. Yeah, I've been there. I've been there 3 or 4 times. We must be getting close to air. 30, okay.
Five, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome very, very much to Conversations, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome to the program a dear friend of mine and the world, and that's Sumner Jules Glimcher. And Mr. Glimcher has been a guest, I guess, 4 or 5 times over the past few years and everything. We've become to be very, very good friends, and he's led a most interesting life, and every time I talk to him, there's new little nuances of his life that come out that are startlingly interesting, and I expect it'll be the same now. We're going to talk about some of his new ideas, and Sumner, so good to welcome you to the set one more time. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you, Harold. It's just as great a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we just met. I just had my 80th birthday, and you graced the party.
I did.
And that was fun talking about that. It wasn't so nice. I'd love to be 20 again, I think, if I could, but I guess you can't. You know, I'm not what the trade-offs are or the rationalizations for aging. It's a one-way street, in a sense, you know, so.
My kids gave me one of these magnetic pictures you put on your refrigerator.
Yeah.
With an older guy, wrinkled, and it says, "Aging is not for sissies." Now, you just had your 80th birthday,
Yes,
and
sir.
I recently had my 90th.
And then we were there talking about that, and then in came our dear friend David Ben David. Not Dave,
Joseph.
Joseph Ben David. Sure, we go back 30 years, he and I.
Right.
But he was the #1 man with a giant philosopher.
Interesting guy.
Martin Buber. He was a representative Martin Buber. I and Thou, a major philosophical
Well,
work.
we met at your party.
Well, yeah, I'd met him years ago, but he came in and he was 95, so we didn't get any 100-year-olds yet or
Right.
anything. But then it came and it livened the place up when the youngsters came, you know, the teenagers or the 20-year-olds, and they brought a new energy. So it's an interesting thing, you know.
Well, you have interesting friends.
I do. I like people. Do you like people?
I love Howard
do.
Bloom, for instance.
Howard Bloom's a major intellectual, you know. That book I love, The God Problem, is really good.
He's a brilliant guy, and
go ahead. Yeah,
and he's had a brilliant career.
Yeah, he has, and not only in the writing intellectual and reading the intellectual history of the 19th century and that problem, you know, how the Huxleys and the Darwins got together and they had dinner here and everything. It was a real major tour de force, and he went back to the beginning of the universe, you know, 13.7 billion years ago, and it's a major work, yeah. And he's done it, and then he had a time when he was he represented in a major way all the very top rock and roll stars.
Yes, he did.
So it was. He's an interesting fellow. Yeah, it's good to have a wide variety of people you're friendly with.
Right.
And so forth.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, now we're talking with you, and let's talk. Let's share your background because you're a filmmaker. You've got some projects going. We want to talk about that project up in Rhinebeck that you're involved in now,
Right.
with flying. Like the Red Baron and the First
World War I airplane.
They have World War I airplanes up in Rhinebeck, New York that can fly and everything, and there's stories around that. But let's share, just go quick, share your born and raised a little bit, and then we're going to talk about some of the dimensions of your life.
Background, I'll be very quick. Born and raised in Boston, went into the Army in 1943, shot during the Battle of the Bulge, had a incredibly miraculous recovery. I should have died when I was 20 years old. Then I had.
You were laying in snow for a long time.
I was lying in snow, which was good because otherwise my blood coagulated. I was shot at 5 o'clock on Christmas afternoon, 1944.
Happy
and,
Christmas.
And lying in the snow, and the blood, I would have bled to death within an hour, but the cold caused the blood to coagulate.
I'll be darned.
So they took me back. I went to a hospital in Paris where they saw my toes had frostbite, and they said, we probably have to amputate your toes. But the blood came back, and I was fine. Then they sent me to Wales for recovery, and I had these massive wounds in my leg, and gangrene had set in. And they said, we're going to have to amputate your leg. And I said, is there any option? They said, well, the Brits have just discovered this new drug. It's called penicillin.
Miracle drug, So, and it worked.
I got a shot in the ass every 4 hours, and the gangrene cleared up.
Isn't it wonderful? The advances, the medical advances, are just staggering in our time.
I wouldn't be here without those advances.
That's right.
But to talk about Rhinebeck, because one of my projects, this has to do with a fascinating story. A friend of mine named Dick Greeley wrote a book called Tempting Fate, and I met him at the Harvard Club. I was showing my book. This was a year ago, and he said, I gave him my book, and he said, I'm writing a manuscript. I'll send you a copy.
Right.
And he sent me a copy, and it was the story of 2 World War I pilots. Now, one was a man named Hobey Baker, and sports fans will recognize that name because in the 100 years ago, Hobey Baker, who was Princeton class of 16, was one of the most incredible athletes who ever lived. I mean, the sports enthusiast know.
Right.
And anybody who doesn't know him, go to Google and type in Hobey Baker, Hobey, Baker, like guys who make bread. The most incredible athlete who majored essentially in hockey and football. And look him up on Google because you'll be astonished at what this guy did. Anyhow, he became a pilot after graduating Princeton, and the reason that Dick Greeley wrote this book is because his uncle, his name is Richard Stiles Greeley, and his uncle Robert Stiles, class of 16 at Harvard, was also a pilot. And Greeley wrote a book that consisted mostly of the diary of his uncle Bob Stiles and the daily letters that Baker wrote to his father at his thrill of mortal combat with the Germans.
As what?
As a pilot.
Yeah, but at the thrill, did you say? No.
Yeah, the thrills. I mean, Baker was thrilled by mortal combat. And he was shooting down German planes, including guys like the Red Baron. Well, he didn't shoot down the Red Baron, but the Red Baron shot down 80-something Allied pilots.
These are biplanes, right?
Yeah, now you got to remember that in World War I, airplanes had just been invented.
Right.
And they were mostly linen and wood and wires, and they were very undependable. We flew something called the Spad that the French made, a biplane, and the Germans flew Fokkers, F-O-K-K-E-R-S. And they flew at like 150 miles an hour.
That was
so when you were in combat with a German, you could recognize him. They weren't like today's jets. I mean, you passed within a few feet of each other, and it became very personal. So I'm doing this proposal for a documentary that will cover the World War I pilots. You can get on the internet, you can get dog fights. You can go to the
You mean
internet.
film footage?
And you can get dog fights
Yeah.
on the internet, and they're you can get pictures of the Red Baron.
Wow, okay.
Manfred von Richthofen.
Yeah, right,
He's
right.
actually on the
Why
internet.
was he called the Red Baron? Why not the Green?
Because he flew a red airplane.
Oh, I see.
He had a triplane,
Uh-huh.
three-winged plane that was painted red.
Oh.
So he was called the Red
He was
Baron.
the only one that flew the red one?
Yeah.
Well, you knew what the target was.
Yeah.
Or the one to avoid, maybe, because he seemed to be quite good at maneuvering it, right? Apparently, yeah.
So anyhow, the Red Baron is quite a character. So I'm preparing, or I have prepared a proposal that will show the Red Baron and World War I pilots.
Has that been done, or have things been done? Is there ever a feature film? I mean, Red Baron's well known.
Yeah.
It was in the comic strip, wasn't there? A comic strip.
I don't know if there was or not.
Peanuts or something was
But-
had Red Baron come in. But
Well, Peanuts is Peanut. Yeah, in a way they've adopted Peanuts as a
yeah,
mascot.
people know
Yeah.
that in a way. But he was a major figure. That was a major war, and it was a reading of technology.
Yeah.
War making. A lot of the technological advancement has been advanced by war making advantage over the other fellow, isn't it?
Well, war is universal, of course. Everybody loves to kill everybody.
Well, I wonder if that'll ever change. Do
No,
you
I
think?
don't think so.
You don't
but
think? You think it's inherent?
What interests me, Harold, and this, I don't know whether or not you have any thoughts on this, but men love to kill other men. Women generally do not. Why is that?
I don't know. I think it seems to be intuitively that seems to be a.
Yeah, I mean, there are
I think.
occasional women murderers, but they're rare.
Yeah.
I mean, men seem to have inbred in them the desire to kill other people.
Well,
Well,
okay.
that's why.
Well, I don't know. You could begin. There are dialectics in the world, and one major one, is male-female. You got East-West. That's another. James Joyce said, the West shall shake the East awake while you have the night for the morn. But you get different belief systems and everything. But there's these differences. And male-female is one major big difference there is between not only Homo sapiens, between right through a lot of the animal kingdom, and you even got replicas of that within the vegetative kingdom. So it exists for some reason. There was a long period of evolution prior to, I don't remember when Lynn Margulis wrote on that very well, when first sexual was entered into the overall process billions of years ago, or millions of years ago. But yeah, it does exist, yeah. The French will say vive la différence, and it does ginger things up in the normal cast where you're not fighting. But the male principle seems to be different than the female. It seems that way.
Yeah, and war seems to be endemic. I mean, there is never a period without war. War seems to be built in somehow. People, and the reason, of course, is always religious. I
Well,
mean,
it's not only, it's also economic. And in my way, if you want to talk about it, it's very interesting. We did a program with this Seth, Baum, about risk and the growth that aired earlier this week and everything. And the risk of destructive capability, there's a group of people who are studying it very carefully in a systematic and responsible way, the various levels of risk to the Homo sapien species by weapons and other things, global warming, technological extensions of consciousness that makes the world different has effect, yeah.
but why is it that religion causes war? I mean, it's we and them, Almost invariably, wars are started because of religious differences.
Would you think so? Yeah, I would think they might. But religious difference, well, we can talk about it. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
And the militant, the crazy militant Islam today, not Islam. I mean, Islam is a peaceful religion.
Yeah.
And Muhammad, the Quran is a peaceful, like our Bible, it promotes peace. But the radicals amongst them in Islam, and Islam, has more adherents than any other religion, I believe, including Christianity.
Yeah.
There are more Islams, there are more Muslims in the world than virtually anybody.
Yeah, between them all, Shia and Sunni, it goes all the way from Indonesia to Mauritania.
Yeah.
You got a big swath of them, and it's Big thing. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's religion. Maybe it is. That certainly has, because you got a lot of history, humanity. It's a little hard to know what went on in the
Oh, God.
Paleolithic. You got a phone thing going. Well, that's
I'm
a
so
common
sorry.
thing. That's no problem. But in the Paleolithic, I mean, it went for, we got maybe 200,000 years. And about 190,000 years of that, we
I
were
thought I
in
turned it
a
off.
very simple, wandering around, gathering and hunting, and probably living off carrion and being, they can project. Ashley Montague wrote well on probably the essential quality of pair bonding. That was an interesting.
I knew
positive.
Ashley.
Did you know
yeah,
Ashley Montague?
Yeah, we
no
met.
kidding. He's a great guy.
I interviewed him.
Yeah.
I interviewed him. He had amazing insights.
Yeah, he was beautiful, right?
Yeah, I met him many years ago. I interviewed him.
You did. Have you got it? Was it interviewed on wire or on paper or text?
It was
or what?
interviewed on, I think, 1/4-inch tape, and I think I've lost all of those tapes that
That's
I
a
used
shame.
to have.
We want to try and save those things.
Yeah.
We got a bunch here in video going back a few years, 40
Well,
years.
you probably know enough to keep things today.
Well, we're trying, yeah, and it's
and
getting easier too. You can store things on a thing
the
the
cloud,
size of
and
a
yeah.
dime. You can store all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of progress being made. But I think the major thing would probably have been, once you get past the Paleolithic, well, we appear most agreeably, I mean, it may be a little different and everything, but the Homo sapiens species appeared about 200,000 years ago out of Homo erectus in Africa. We're all Africans. And it says about 10,000 generations, and to about 190,000 years, roughly so, finally they got the ability to grow food rather than just find carrion or whatever they had, or something that happened to be presenting, wanting and gathering. We don't know much about that. Archaeologically, we'd have to get things and everything. Actually made a thing where the pair bonding was probably essential to the human thing because of the long nurturing of the infant. The pair bonding would have been a great advantageous thing evolutionarily and everything. But anyway, once you got to civilization, and then you got a surplus of food, you have a surplus of capability, so you could begin to have people who would be able to put together, civilized, I think, means city dwelling. And once you got to there, you had Mesopotamia and Egypt and so forth. So they began to have that, and as soon as that happened, you got ruling class, because you had to organize all these schleppy workers to do things like build pyramids. I don't see how somebody would have enjoyed dragging a great big, be one of 10,000 dragging a great big stone across the hot desert to make a pyramid, or a lot of the great things that were done by slave labor, essentially.
Isn't it amazing how those pyramids were built?
Well, the whole thing, what about Notre Dame and about all the great edifices that were built and so forth? And what happened is, in order to establish a state, you had 4 major complexes: wheat and barley in the West, and then rice in China, and then maize, and another one was potato in Bolivia.
Europe.
In Bolivia. Well, that was in Bolivia. They were places where they got scarcity from the food quest is what it was, beyond what you could do in hunting, but civilization. But once you get to that, then you had people on top. You had a pharaoh, you had a king, you had somebody on top, and the main thing that they used throughout all of history, it seems to me, in order to establish establishing a what was called politically legitimate way of organizing things, was to have soldiers and people who can protect and assert your ability to conquer others. And then you conquer them, and then through time you have creation stories, helps give legitimacy, ethical or other kinds of things to your system, but the soldiers are what back you up.
Yeah,
That's
but
what
now,
makes it possible.
But now we have
It still holds. It's called realpolitik. It's whoever's got the gun can rule.
Now we have atomic weapons, and the major question philosophically is, will civilization survive? Because we have countries that have atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, and some of the governments are unstable, and some of these weapons could be stolen, of course, because security is only so great. So, you know, the whole civilization could go up in smoke.
But that's why they fight. That's why they fight, because my tribe is stronger than your tribe. And if my tribe wins over your tribe, then I'm the king and you're the serf, and we will conquer you. And the right of conquest is part of the, or somebody's technologically advanced over another. Like the Amerindians didn't have a chance against the European culture coming that was advanced technologically. So, but it's all based upon power. Who's got the power? And always the overall assumption about the overall context is, if you have the power, then you have the right to enjoy. And in a situation where one wins and one loses, there's not enough. There's only one piece of bread on the table, and for one to win, the other one has to lose. So that's what they'd better win, or else they're going to be on the wrong side of having any right to have any material benefit. So they've been fighting over scarcity. That's essentially, I think, more than religion. Religion would be part of the propaganda that would assert your system as superior to another. And then there's this technologically based and materialistically based and everything, the power.
Well, I think it's the religious differences that are most divisive.
You think it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, maybe so. I don't know what are there's not that much. I mean, most of the what do you got? What have you got? You have Buddhism and
it's us
Shinto.
against them. I mean, they all claim peace.
Yeah.
The Christian Bible claims peace. The Muslim Quran.
It's part of a propaganda campaign. No, it's like propaganda.
Yeah.
No, in a way, because the political leadership has to do with who's got the guns. And that's how you have power and legitimacy and the power to assert yourself. You're talking about male, female, right?
So are we going to survive?
I don't know. I talked with this young man, or a relative, in his prime, actually. We did the program that aired last Tuesday. And that's something that his group of people, very responsible people, are investigating that very instance. Not only the weapons, but also other aspects of human abilities to affect the environment. Massive catastrophic things that exist, like an all-out unleashing of the weapons of the United States. Something that would be so horrendous. Somebody drop a bomb, an atomic bomb on the, you wouldn't be doing anything rational. The rationality would be out the window. Something that would do that, an atomic bomb on the Empire State Building or something, or Washington or something that would set it off. The capability is there. Well, apparently eliminate the species.
If the atomic bomb were dropped on New York, it would obliterate the entire city, not just, it would make the 9/11 disaster seem like a little pinprick.
Yeah, and it's something, a suitcase bomb, it could be done or something. And then what would the ramifications be? You're not going to just sit there and take that. Then you'd have to find out, and then what would be the thing that could unleash the Trident submarines? That's thermonuclear that we have. And the unleashing, we can't stand it, and that would be based upon. I guess there's some of that is religious and everything, but it's the powers. It's realpolitik. Yet Hitler thought the Aryans were better than the Jews or the regular people, and they've got all this propaganda that they do. They build it. The creation story is part of that, by which they can have power because our God's better than their God, and that sort of thing. But no, that's a little too glib because you have ethics and things that come out of that. But the political class, I don't think they pay much attention to that, except something as a way of corralling the people as serfs. As always it's been, and it continues.
I'm hoping that as people grow older, they grow wiser.
You think so?
Well,
maybe.
I'm developing a new series called The Elderly.
Okay. A new series, what? Are you talking television or what?
Well, I would love it to be a television program. I would love to see, because I do believe that with age comes some wisdom. Mm-hmm. I do believe that we can learn from older people. Perhaps it's because I'm 90 years old. but I think I have learned much more than when I was
I'm
60.
here to testify you're a very wise guy. I mean, wise man. I think it's a difference.
Anyhow, I'm developing a series called The Elderly,
Okay.
which ideally I would love to see as a weekly television program,
Okay.
because the elderly are the fastest growing cohort in America today.
Is that true?
That is.
Lay it out. What does that mean, cohort? Or what do you mean?
It means that people, say, from age 60 to 90
Yeah.
are growing at a faster rate than younger people.
That's interesting in
So
itself,
that
isn't
we
it?
are
Yeah.
becoming a nation. It has to do with many things, like
medicine.
longevity,
Yeah.
the fact that we live longer. So I want to develop a series of programs when we would be discussing the problems that go with aging. I mean, with aging comes all kinds of illnesses,
Yeah.
all kinds of benefits, the wisdom of aging and so on. So I would love to see a program that dealt with older people. I think that these people are people that have special needs. They have special insights.
Yeah.
So I think a program that interviewed older people or had to do with older people, it would seem to me that sponsors such as AARP or insurance companies would love to sponsor such a program.
That would be a natural, wouldn't it? Yeah, in terms of
and it could address
outreach. Yeah.
it could address the situation that older people find themselves.
But haven't they done that? Doesn't that exist within the coterie now, or is it all just
Not to my
20-year-old
knowledge.
pulpituous young ladies and everything, and rock stars and things, or don't they have they haven't done that? I mean, why haven't they done that?
I
Or
don't think
if they
anybody
haven't,
has paid much attention.
Why?
I don't know, because maybe older people are thought of as geezers that that don't have much to contribute to society.
Yeah.
When actually older people have the wisdom, the experience, and lifetime of knowing things and learning things, so they can make a contribution.
Well, I think in most quarters, respect the elderly is respected. I mean, in most civilized quarters, they're respected for the wisdom, and deference is given to the elders and everything like that.
Interestingly enough, the other night at your place when I was talking with Howard Bloom,
Yeah.
who I think is a very interesting and intelligent guy, he also thinks that a program on the elderly would be a great idea.
Huh.
We share that. As a matter of fact, that we've been emailing each other back and forth.
You have, yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning. You have that thing. If we could, that's interesting. I don't want to lose that. Let's talk some about that. It's an interesting idea. We have but anyway, you have that series where you show films at an institution. Share that. And you were involved at NBC and all these kind of things when you were younger and coming out of the war.
I spent my first 6 years at NBC. I was the production manager on the Sid Caesar show. It was a fascinating time.
Did they pay you for that? What a pleasure to be in the company of Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner and Neil Simon.
Oh,
and Carl Reiner thought that Glimcher was a very funny name.
Well, Glimcher is a funny name,
well,
don't you think? I know he's a funny guy.
There's only one Glimcher family in the world. There's a rich Glimcher and a genius Glimcher, and only one family in the world. And I once heard, I've never met him, but one of my friends ran across a Harry Wong Glimcher from China.
I'll be darned.
So one of us must have had a pleasant stay in China at one time.
Along that Silk Road or something. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. What is it? What is it? Where is it?
It came originally from the Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've never been there, but
what do you mean only one? There's only one
Glimcher family in the world.
How many Glimchers are there in the world?
Well, now with the young, when I was growing up, it was a tightly knit group in Boston. I had, when my father came to this country, he was an entrepreneur. He came from the Ukraine, and he bought a little truck, and he sold potato chips on the side.
Yeah.
And then he bought a supermarket, and we were doing quite well until the Depression. And he brought, there were 5 or 6 brothers and sisters that he brought over. Anyhow, let's not talk about the name so much because it wasn't, you know, it's not that great. But I had, you asked about NBC. I loved the, I started telling the story about Reiner thinking Glimcher was a funny name. So when he did the Mary Tyler Moore show, he put a character named Herman Glimcher, who was never seen on screen. He was an off-screen boyfriend of Mary Tyler Moore because Carl thought the name was so funny.
Yeah.
And my
funny.
family called and said, you know, who's Herman?
Yeah.
Herman's a figment of Carl Reiner's imagination.
Darn, yeah.
But I love the golden age of television.
Oh yeah,
oh my God.
wasn't it good? That you must have yeah, maybe we're reminiscing about
When
things.
I began, I came to New York in 1949 when I got out of school. And my first job was at NBC as a page. And television then, the screens were 12 inches wide, black and white.
Yeah.
We went on the air at 5:30 in the afternoon with a show called Howdy Doody.
Howdy Doody.
And at 9:30 we had another show called Lights Out. And the rest of the time, your television set had a test pattern, and you were supposed to focus your set, which of course you could never do.
Yeah.
But I loved because every television program came from New York, so that was really the golden age. I just loved that period.
It is when something new is coming. There's a certain birthing quality that's good when you're part of something new. It appeals to the entrepreneurial spirit in us.
And there were 3 networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC. There were only 3 channels that you could watch.
Right.
And today there are 500 channels. Or
no,
what?
on my cable television, there's 1,998 channels. And they're all selling soap or something.
Nothing worth, and nothing. What did Minnow call it?
Great wasteland.
Vast wasteland.
Yeah, the vast wasteland. You're right. Good to be enunciating. Right. Yeah.
What can we do to make television better?
Well, I think we ought to have a series about aging. What do you think? I think it's
a good idea.
But you had that thing where you give these film things, and that agency, what is that called again?
It's called NATAS, N-A-T-A-S.
What does that stand for?
National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences.
That's the organization that gives the Emmys?
They give out the Emmys, and every month...
Not enemies, Emmys.
Emmys.
Yeah, you said enemies. I think that was what they call a Freudian slip, young man. I'm not sure.
Anyhow, if anybody's interested, I show a series called Meet the Filmmaker.
You do. Really good stuff.
Every month, I invite an independent documentary filmmaker, and if anybody watching this program would like to come, go to NATAS, N-A-T-A-S, National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and get put on their mailing list.
Yeah, right.
And we show a documentary. We have a reception with wine and food, and people from...
And great people gather there.
And great
I've been there a number of times,
We have as many as 60 people with a large screen.
Yeah.
And I invite a new filmmaker every month.
Yeah.
We just had one.
Stuff,
we had one last week, and we'll have another one in April.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm on that list. Thank you for that.
I hope you come.
And you are a filmmaker yourself.
I've made some 3 dozen documentaries, and they've won many, many awards. I've done some teaching, and when I was younger, I taught at Harvard, my alma mater. I taught at Columbia for 10 years, and my most recent teaching job was at NYU, where I was the director of the Department of Film, Video, and Broadcasting at the School of Continuing Education.
Okay, good, yeah.
And I think I built the finest film program on the East Coast.
Congratulations. You knew George Stoney then, right?
Very well.
Yeah, wasn't he a grand man?
George was one of the...
George Stoney.
George was one of the guys who, as you know, started places like Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
I'm very aware of that and
Yeah.
thankful for his contribution to
I
setting
met
that up.
George in 1960. We were both at Columbia University.
Yeah.
He was a grand old man.
He's associated with NYU Tisch School, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he then went, we were together at Columbia, and then he moved to NYU, and later I moved to NYU.
Uh-huh.
Grand guy.
How do people move around between those two major universities, and how do universities get to be? What do you think of the university educational system as you understand it, the way it's moving?
Well, I don't know a lot about it. I know my own alma mater, which I think is an extraordinary school. I am so grateful. Did I tell you the story that I?
Tell me a story.
Tell
me a story.
Well, I always wanted to go to MIT. When I was growing up, MIT had lectures at night free of charge for the public. And I lived in a town called Winthrop, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I could take a streetcar, trolley car, for a nickel from Winthrop to Cambridge. And I went to these free lectures, and I thought MIT was my dream school. So the day I got out of the Army, I was still in my uniform. I had no civilian clothes. I borrowed my dad's car, and I drove to Cambridge to MIT. Yeah, I had my uniform and my combat infantry badge and my Purple Heart and all that stuff. And I went to MIT, and I said, I want to enroll. And the guy looked at my record, and he said, we can't take you.
Why?
My God, I said, I had all A's and B's. Why? He said, well, your grades were fine, but you were in ASTP in the Army, and you had the equivalent of a year and a half of college. Now, when I went into the
ASTP, what does that
when
say?
I went into the Army, if you had an IQ of 110, you could go to officer candidate school. But something more elite than that was ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Well, if you had 115 IQ, you were put into ASTP. And my IQ was something over 115. So they sent me to Washington University, where I spent 9 months. At the end of 9 months, Patton was losing infantrymen by the hundreds. So they wiped out 120,000 of the guys with the highest IQs in the Army and sent us to basic infantry, where we spent 6 months doing 25-mile hikes and crawling on our bellies over obstacles.
That's how you ended up at the Ardennes?
And I ended up as an infantry replacement and was sent to the Army in fall of 1944. And I ended up in the Battle of the Bulge at the Ardennes Forest, where I was shot and had my,
that whole thing
could have died when I was 20.
Thank goodness for penicillin. No, seriously, that's a march of growth of life expectancy, and that turns into the elderly thing too.
My life expectancy that night was 0, but I pulled through. Anyhow, so MIT wouldn't take me. So I said, what am I going to do? And the guy said, why don't you try Harvard? So I drove down Mass Ave until I saw those red brick buildings, and thinking quickly, I get into the admissions office, and I said, I always wanted to come to Harvard.
And people would die to get to Harvard. Now, I don't know if it's the same.
And they took me.
Why not?
I was surprised.
Well, okay, but it wasn't a legacy thing or something. No. And that's interesting that they had those people in the military. I didn't realize they had that, in the military. I was in another period.
You were a much younger man.
Well, I'm 10 years younger, as it happens, and I had to go for 2 years. I didn't like the Army.
World War II was very exciting.
That was a whole different thing. It was Korea time.
Tremendously exciting, because it's the only war. I mean, we've had Korean wars and Vietnam wars, but World War II, everybody in this country,
everybody was all in.
Everybody loved it. There was this universal feeling that we should defeat the Germans.
Under the sway of Hitler, who was an amazing orator that could just stir up all these kind of things against Versailles and the history of having not been treated right and thinking, having notions of Übermenschen and Untermenschen and all that sort of thing that you were referring to with the absurdity of the way the world has emerged.
Well, I think war is one of these endemic things that never stops.
You think so? You think there's ever a condition where you could get to be where that is not the condition? It's fighting over who's the winner.
Well, look at today.
Yeah.
Look, you can't enumerate how many wars are going on, and mostly in the Middle East.
Yeah. You think
Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq.
Yeah. And you're right, they do. And then look at Europe, torn by Protestant, Catholic, this kind of thing. The religions have been very much at the core of what separated a lot of the people, on to the point where they would kill each other. It's odd, because it was always done in the name of the Prince of Peace that they represented. It's an interesting story. Really.
It is.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe, I guess there's a lot of attention again to that. Do you think it's endlessly going to be there? When you get to be where you got weapons that may be able to wipe out the species, is there something on the other side that we may be at a level where we don't have to be so barbaric?
Well,
it's got a the idea of just brute strength.
Yeah,
that undergirds the establishment of a political order. It's called realpolitik, and you can talk all about your principles, and there's some things you can get a new Declaration of Independence or something, but essentially the relationship between the nations is based on who's got the power.
Right.
The military powers, most of our budget goes for military to assert our ability to set the pattern. And it used to be somebody else, and it will be somebody else.
We are incredibly lucky to be,
you and I,
to be in this country.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's wonderful. I like this country, yeah.
I mean, this country is quite amazing with all of its problems, and we do have problems. Probably the biggest one is the racial problem.
Well, yeah, well, that's it. Then you still got the thing, the war of the sexes. The women couldn't vote. I mean, history is a nightmare from which, in terms of, there's emerging justice. Do you think there's emerging justice and universal acceptance of the importance of everybody in a democratic kind of concept with time?
Yeah,
I think there is through time.
If you think of the fact that at one time, and it's not long ago, that women couldn't vote.
1920 in this country.
And now Hillary Clinton is running for president. I mean, just think of that span.
Yeah.
The differential.
And Obama won the presidency already against this time when they were outright chattel slavery, for crying out loud.
A black man became president.
Yeah.
These are extraordinary.
That's encouraging, yeah. But you got but it's still, to be realistic, it's based on power. Who's got the weapons to intimidate? Or it's not only weapons, but it's basically weapons. You got to have soldiers to protect the king, Praetorian Guard, or the people that are in power, in order to assert the rule of the few who live in the castle against the multitudes who wallow around, more or less, in comparative terms, in the mud. That's the history of the world. And that's how you can get great big buildings built with the king being celebrated, or the person that's in power. And then that becomes infusing, and people get their sense of identity by that. Well, that's the history of the world. But whether it will ever change, I don't know. Maybe it might be able to now in a way that it couldn't have been 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
I sense that there are two big problems in our country. The first is the problem of race, which has been ameliorated to some degree when we can have a black president, but still, you look at Ferguson and you look at different things about police, white police, black people, so you have a problem of race. The other problem, and it's maybe even worse, is the disparity in income.
Well, yes.
You take the top 1% of Americans who make so much more money than the bottom 90%, the 10% versus the 90%. And you know, that could, in older days, that could have caused a revolution.
Well, it could have. It did cause a revolution in France. But the income, I talked to Sarah Flounders one day a couple 3 or 4 years ago, and she said the income inequality in the United States of America that you cited was greater than it was in 1789 France, where there was a revolution, you know, in that. But it's always been, I think it's always been that you got a few people who own and run everything. They were called kings.
Now
you wanted to become a king.
Now they're called capitalists or businessmen.
Well, at the moment, yeah, it's varied. And then sometimes there were religious leaders or something. That would be a thing. But the material basis of it was control over what was to be done. And you had, you know, and the king had they lived in a golden palace, and they had a few things. They had serfs picking up leaves on their estate. It's more or less like that now.
Called the golden rule. He who has the gold rules.
Well, in a sense, no, who has the guns rule. No, the one that has the gun, that's the first thing.
The one who has the gold hires the guns.
Well, all right, you have to get to that. But in order to establish yourself as politically legitimate, it's done by having guns by which you can conquer territory and people. Then you do that, you get it established, then you have creation stories or propaganda that celebrates how wonderful you are, and then it builds up into national identity, language, and all that. We're better, and that kind of thing. But the basic premise of realpolitik, at least certainly Karl Haushofer and that sort of thing, is who's got the guns? Who's got the military power? We have the military power to enforce our power on the people of the world. The United States emerged out of the Second World War.
The United States is the most powerful country in the world.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although who knows what China will do in the next 100 years.
Well, yeah, if there is 100 years, because that process has come to a point where we developed all that power, and it goes to the military. The money goes to the military, so more or less. You've got to build more Trident submarines with thermonuclear weapons to be stronger than the other, the same principles still apply. And then it gets economically that way. The strong can overcome the weak, and it's still that way. And so now you got income distribution going to people who own the capital assets, and you're right, it's really, that's a major problem. Partly because they've got the process so developed, not only information technology, but robotics. People as wage slaves are not needed. They had to be needed on Henry Ford's thing. They had to have somebody to turn those nuts mechanically. They needed people to do it to make the production. They don't need people to do production now. It can be done by information and filling out forms autonomically with an algorithm or something. You don't need people to check boxes and do all the little bureaucratic things that had to be done. And you got a problem of being able to distribute effective buying power of the good things that could be made available to the power, but they don't have any way of distributing income to them because that which is producing it is all owned by a tiny group of people who get richer all the time because they own the assets, the capital assets that are responsible for the wealth. And there's no way of distributing buying power to the masses. That's a major problem confronting it.
Poverty is a terrible problem.
Horrible. Horrible. To be in poverty is horrible. That's the lot of most of the people of the world, are poverty.
Poverty is, and it also, it's not quite so bad in America, that is to say.
Oh, no, not at all, yeah.
Because there are some social services so that people really don't starve.
Well,
but there are homeless, there are people who are desperately poor, and there are people who are desperately sick and can't afford health insurance.
Yeah, right.
We have our problems.
Well, we do have the problems here, yeah. It's not as bad as the whole of the world's society and so forth. And there's been progress. They got penicillin. They got streptokinase to fight heart attacks.
Yeah.
The life expectancy keeps growing. It's good for the demographic for your...
You know, not only did penicillin save my leg, but you know, I have a pacemaker.
Okay.
I have 2 stents. So without modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today.
That's like a little staple that goes in the artery to hold back the plaque on the wall. How did it get to be called a stent? You have a stent, is it the same word as a stent?
S-T-E-N-T.
How do they call it a stent? It's like a...
I don't know, but it's a little thing, maybe an inch or so long. It's tubular. It's like a wire mesh, and it gets threaded. What happened is I was getting in the arteries close to my heart. They were narrowing through plaque and so on.
Sure, yeah, that's
and these little stents, and when they saw this on some of these wonderful instruments that can see your inside, so they took this thing and they threaded this up and pushed the walls of the artery aside to widen it so the blood can flow through it.
Miracle.
Otherwise, you'd have a stroke and die.
Yeah, that's right.
So I have 2 of those in 2 of my arteries.
I can remember when that was just introduced. We had friends who were surgeons, and she came, a real serious nurse, surgical nurse, and she said, there's this miracle new thing called a stent.
Yeah.
I don't know, do they call it a stent in the Army? Is that a term? Is that the same?
When I had them done, I was long a civilian.
No, I know, but where did the word stent, why didn't they call it staple? It's like a staple or something, or, you know, like that. Anyway,
well,
we're
when
getting
you
off
say,
the
why
track.
did they call it a stent? Why did they call a staple?
Well, okay. Anyway, back to the thing, but you're right, people are living longer. And they're expanding the day. You know, it's now 78, and it's heading up the way with the ability to bring medicine.
Well,
and then the thing to have better lives. You know, have surcease from sorrow and suffering and all the things that are quasi-slavery that people have to do and be concerned with in order to survive.
Well, I'm an example. I'm 90 years old, and I've got this stuff inside of me, but I'm in enormously good health.
Yeah.
I have no pain, and I could easily live another 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, right. You can contribute, yeah.
So,
well, yeah, and you're right, that coterie is growing. So I think it's growing on a world scale, so there should be some attention being given to
the elderly.
Yeah, there's an assumption somehow that you get to a certain peak that's physical, you can run fast or do something, but does it, in mathematics, people hit their big stride when they're very young, teenagers even. They lose that ability to be really creative, particularly in mathematics, to make the big breakthroughs. There's an Indian who was only a teenager or something, made breakthroughs. Or they assume they reach a peak and then you go downhill after that. So who wants to listen to people who are on their way down? They want to listen to people on the way up.
But as you age, you grow in wisdom.
You think so? Well, that's assuming that now that we're aged.
And I'm thinking you...
I'm making a joke.
You grow...
No, it's true.
You grow in experience.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, we have vast amounts of knowledge of experiences that we've had. And
well, that is true. I think that's probably been respected by great numbers through the ages, because that is probably a true thing. Well, but then there is dementia that comes.
Well,
and
course,
you know,
but I'm not talking
capability.
I'm not talking about getting sick. I'm talking about when you keep your marbles.
Yeah, right, and you're able to do that more, lead a fuller biography all the time by the
That's why I want to do this series on the elderly.
What do you mean a series? You think of a television thing or something?
I think the ideal thing would be a weekly, hour-long television program that would address the needs of older people.
The needs of older people. A lot of those needs would be to keep a healthy way of going, or what? Well, don't we have things that are, as they say in the biz, skewed to that demographic? I mean, people have to buy... there must be a lot of people who have to buy Geritol or something.
Do you know of a television program that addresses the needs of the elderly?
Not
I don't.
Specifically, I don't. Well, okay, you're talking about network and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And, okay, well, that's true. No, I don't. I know we have one here at MNN. Active aging is done. There's a fellow here who does active aging, and that's there. That's to encourage it. But I think they expect the older elements to just retire and
fade away.
Fade away. They just fade away. Yeah, right.
Old soldiers never die; they just fade away.
Thank
Remember
you.
MacArthur?
Yes, I do remember that. But do you think that you're trying to make a case for older aged people, and that there is a wisdom, accumulated wisdom, that is there if it can be encouraged and so forth? I think there might be something to be said for that, and there would be advertising support, I suppose, for that.
I think it would be a great idea.
How many ideas have you contributed toward programs that would be good that you've been able to take off and be picked up by the broader society?
Well, I don't know about programs. I can tell you I've made 36 films. Many of them were sponsored, of course.
Yeah,
Like the Taiwan government hired me to make 4 films. One of them was on Confucius. Do you know much about Confucius?
Not very much. No,
He
not really.
was one of the most amazing
great
people.
philosopher, yeah.
I had one of the best times. You know, when you make a documentary, you're learning.
You sure would be, yeah.
So when I was asked to do it, or actually I wasn't asked, I was asked by the Taiwan government. I was making another film, and they said, while you're here, we can afford to pay you to make a second film.
Okay.
What would you like to do? And instantly I said, I'd like to do a film on Confucius.
Wow, what were you doing the other film on? Do you happen to remember?
Yes, it was on Chinese women. They had hired me, Taiwan government, when the women's movement this was in the 1970s, when women became popular in terms of knowing that women were advancing.
Yeah, right.
The Chinese government decided to show how modern they were, and that Chinese women had all kinds of places in the industry, in the judiciary, in the political world. So they hired me to make a film on Chinese women.
Okay, you got that done?
I did, and I love it. And
Yeah, how long was it?
It's 30 minutes. It's called Old World, New Women.
Good, that's good.
I would love to show it.
Yeah, we could have gotten a clip on another occasion. We will, yeah.
Maybe I can show it and meet the filmmaker.
That's an idea. Why don't you do that?
It's my program. Maybe I can show one of my films.
No, but that's so you had that and then yeah. So the potential of television or multimedia for education is incredibly important.
Especially with the internet and streaming.
Yes, right.
Your program can be seen around the world.
As it happens, they are. All the programs here do go.
Isn't that amazing?
It is absolutely staggering that it can be done, and they can be archived.
And aren't they on YouTube?
Yeah, a couple thousand are up on YouTube with some major people like Glimcher. No, but you've got experience in the real world of that, and there would be that. Why is it that so much of the programming is about some sort of, I don't want to say insipid, maybe that's condescending.
Well,
insipid stuff filled in with a bunch of ads for skin products. It's all about getting money.
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll ever have to stop worrying about money.
I'll tell you
or having human society predicated upon money criteria. That seems to be the major thing that people are interested in.
I know. People are interested in money, and people are interested in trivia, and people are not so much interested, Harold, in the important things in life. And it's a shame. This is why Newton Minow said that television is a vast waste.
Well, it shouldn't be. No, what I'm trying to say, the Open University, it could be a great source. On the History Channel, they have things on the History Channel that are really hugely interesting in terms of major subject. You can go through and present it multidimensionally. They can have graphics. They can have all kinds of stuff. It's hugely educational, but there's a bias against multimedia because it's thought of as a wasteland. But it's got tremendous educational potentiality for educating the people of the world.
Education will be the only thing that can save us.
Okay, one of the problems is, as is always the case in television, we got eternity of time. We've run out of time, Mr. Glimcher.
I can't believe it.
We have. We've run out of time. It's a pleasure and an honor to welcome you once again to the program. Your pleasure to have his perceptions. We'd invite you to tune in again. Tomorrow. We'll be coming back tomorrow. But Sumner, thank you so very much. We got to continue on this. And
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. It was my great pleasure. It's always a good pleasure to talk with you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and we'll be coming back again. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's a wrap, as they say, my brother.
Thank you. Now, Harold, I have